Hello and welcome to the Cole Memo. New year, new me, new look. Let's go. Hey folks, this is going to be a great episode. Before we bring our guests up for this episode, I just want to remind you that you can stream my new mini doc now at colememo.com/mini-doc. We'll give you a brief teaser at what that looks like, and then I'm going to bring my guests on stage. Let's go.
Beginning January 1st, 2020, the recreational use of cannabis will be legal in the state of Illinois.
Available to stream now, my mini doc dives into the history of Illinois legalization, starting with
January 1st, what should we expect? The biggest thing that we need people to understand is that January 1, in terms of the criminal justice system here in this state, is the end of prohibition.
See how Illinois missed its chance at real cannabis reform with key failures, including the fact that
the program includes regulation on possession limits.
So people can still be arrested for a possession.
And I want to highlight that in its first year of legalized recreational marijuana in the state of Illinois, they arrested 3 times as many black people for possession than any other race.
We've run into so much cannabis, we've run out of places to put it.
I've represented people and taken their cases through the court system who got charged with more serious crimes only because the police said that they smelled cannabis. And not because the police said you have illegal cannabis, or not because you have too much cannabis, or not because you're high on cannabis, but because I can smell it and that's it.
Attorney goes, he understands that he can't be smoking and his cannabis flower shouldn't be open. And I was like, I'd like to say for the record that I was not smoking and my flower was not open.
So that's where we're at right now in Illinois, and I hope it changes.
Start watching now at colememo.com/mini-doc.
Once again, you can watch that at colememo.com/mini-doc. I'm bringing up my friend Phil, who you might recognize from the mini doc. Phil, how's it going tonight?
It's going good.
How, what you smoking on?
This is some Zope from High Tech company from Michigan.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, let's bring on our guests today. Rachel and Chris Berry are returning to the show. Rachel, Chris, how's it going? We'll start with you, Rachel. What's up?
Hey, Cole, it's going good. Thanks for having us on again.
Heck yeah. IllinoisHGA.com for folks that are wondering. Chris, how's it going over there?
It's great to be back, Cole. I think this is the first time we're back since the event we had at the Capitol, right? So it's great to be kind of celebrating with you. And new year, let's go.
Yeah, and celebrate we will. Well, there's a lot of good things to celebrate, a lot of good things to look forward to. But before we get to that, I wanted to give you the space. Rachel, do you have some things you want to tell our audience about, some upcoming events?
Yeah, thanks, Cole. First off, we just published a new blog tonight. So if you are interested, check us out on illinoishga.com/blog. There's a bunch of other cool blogs. We've been really hitting them hard the last couple weeks. So if you're looking to get updated, check out our latest, which is titled Hemp Reform in Illinois, Fear Tactics and Political Games Exposed. So check that out. And also 2 events that are coming up that should be on your radar is our next membership meeting, which was scheduled for the 24th of January. We're pushing it back a week. We have some things in the works and we need an extra week to wrap those things up and make sure that they're ready to share with everybody. So we're now doing that event virtually on January 31st at 6:30 in the evening. You can sign up on our website. Again, on our homepage, there's a link, illinoishga.com. And then we have an exciting event coming up that centers hemp building. That's going to be at Patagonia at the Fulton Market location, February 19th. So get that one on your schedule if you're interested in learning more about hemp as a building material and watching a movie with us that was produced by Patagonia. So check that out too. Thanks, Cole.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for coming on today. And, honestly, what I wanted to start off with today is it's something we'll be touching on throughout this, so I don't mean to dwell on it too much. I think this will rear its head a few times throughout this conversation today. But Phil and I were talking just about how this whole thing went, and we're about to talk about it, give a good recap, I think, in this good episode. But just seeing it and knowing what we know and knowing what's kind of been going on behind the scenes, it's really, Phil and I were discussing, it's made us kind of lose faith in the media. Like, you know, when you just see rampant misinformation reported. And it's funny because, you know, I'm sitting here saying that. I know that people that are on the other side of this argument, I don't understand why there are sides on this. But what I've noticed is that when money is involved in the equation, logic seems to go out the window. So, you know, but I guess, you know,
I do want to interject though. Block Club and the Tribe Chicago both had much better reporting on this issue than other people did.
Yeah, and actually we're going to talk about some of their work today, and if we don't hit any that you think of, definitely let me know. But I have to agree, there was some good reporting. Thank you for interjecting with that, because I shouldn't paint with too broad of a brush here, but it just, let me put it this way, it seemed like the mainstream, there was like a narrative, you know, and it's like, it's really frustrating to see. And you know, I'll share something that I've talked about on the show in the past. Like, I've talked about this on the show in the past. I've never showed it. I decided, well, tonight, why not? We've mentioned, you know, that these stories are pushed. You know, it's not like, I don't know, it depends on your outlet. Again, like Phil just said, there are good outlets out there, but some outlets, and a lot of the way that the news works is you get like stories pushed to you from PR companies, and like the way that the news works is like the way that this show works, where I like see something interesting from like a person that went through it or through other news sources, or I talk to them themselves and I just like share it. Like, I thought that's how like the news works, and it like doesn't seem like that's how it does work. Like, you know what I mean? And again, I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush. There are good sources out there, but any thoughts on this? Do you guys get what I'm trying to say? Because I feel like I'm not putting it into words well.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. It seemed like the more like citizen journalists and really local journalists were able to capture the real story better than the larger media outlets. And yeah, there's a lot of regurgitation of just the same outdated or just misinformation that it is very frustrating. I think that everybody moving forward in 2025 should be supporting these small media outlets better. And we should be making sure that we're adding to the narrative this year.
Yeah, and you know, I guess that's kind of what the point I want to give people more space to talk about this, but that's kind of the point I was trying to get, is that the narrative so far has been, and I'm just looking for different quotes here, you know, I believe our Cannabis Regulation Oversight Officer says hemp harms not only the cannabis industry, but most importantly, it's poisoning the people in the state of Illinois. Another quote from the Chicago Sun-Times, kids don't understand how lethal these ingredients are. And I'm just sitting here and I'm like, we're talking about cannabis, right? Like, and this is what I'm talking about. It seems like the dominating narrative in the media, and I want to pass this over to you guys, is like this untested, unsafe gas station weed. You know, there's like a lot of buzzwords that they throw in there that like just kicks it down a notch. And I know we've talked about this subject a lot, but it's just something I wanted to confront right at the beginning of this episode. Like, this narrative is very interesting to me, to say the least.
Yeah, I think you know, never attribute to maliciousness what you can attribute to incompetence. And so a certain amount of that is going to happen in the industry, I think, like with the media reporting on this industry, because it's relatively new. So like some of it is forgivable. Like you're quoting verbatim people who are pushing some kind of agenda with what they're saying, and it just goes straight into the paper with like no sort of fact check or like challenge to any of it really. In a lot of these articles, they're just like straight up, you know, printing whatever it is that somebody said with no challenge. So definitely media could be more responsible on that. But again, like, it's difficult to do your job as someone who is a fact checker in this industry as well, because it is so new that trying to rely on any kind of scientific evidence or even any kind of like legal cases or anything like that, it's all cutting edge. So you can't blame the media and say they're all bad because they're in, and they all purposefully are against it. It does seem like some outlets do have a history of having sort of a either positive or negative spin that they usually put on the issue of hemp and cannabis in general. But yeah, I'm looking at those sources that you mentioned, Phil, and yeah, I thought they were also really good on the issue, and it's been really good to hear all of the reporting that's come out of this. I think last time there wasn't even this much reporting. This time there was really a huge amount.
Right. Yeah. And I think, like you said, the tribe, I believe, is one that I'll pull up here, that really seem to understand that this isn't an issue about safety. This is an issue. I mean, I actually even quoted a licensee saying that. Let me find the quote here. So the quote. Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Just while you're finding it, in reference to what you said, like to prompt this, the thing about like testing and hemp being unsafe versus like licensed cannabis. Block Club was the only reporting I saw mention that at all, that like, oh, when they say that the safe stuff is only coming from licensed dispensaries. There was also this Sun-Times story a couple years ago about how pre-rolls are moldy and they don't pass testing. And haven't we all been smoking weed on the black market for decades and not had an issue?
Yes.
I just had never seen an actual like news outlet say that, and I was like, hey.
I'm going to quickly play the moment that you were referring to from the Block Club Chicago. Here it is.
Kind of talked about how dispensaries, they weed through all this sort of stuff, no pun intended, and everything is safe and no problem. Is that entirely true? Do we have evidence that maybe even the dispensary stuff isn't as up to snuff, no pun intended, as it is advertised?
Yeah, shout out to a 2021 investigation from the Chicago Sun-Times that tested pre-rolls at licensed dispensaries in the Chicago area, emphasis on the word licensed there. And they found that 8 of them contaminated mold, yeast, bacteria, other yucky stuff you don't want in your weed that exceeded state standards. 2 of them had potency far less than advertised. So I guess there is fear even amongst licensed dispensaries that there's cutting corners, that greed is getting in the way of quality checks, making sure all this stuff goes through its own process. And I'd like to note, John, people have been buying unregulated weed for millenniums. You go get the Cali Kush from the guy who pulls up to your house in a car, and you put crumpled bills in his pocket. Like, that stuff isn't being traced seed to sell, and many people have been smoking that stuff for a really long time. So regulation products processes in general are pretty much a brand new idea, at least through the state.
And if you go to colememo.com/guest index, you can actually see an episode that I recorded with the journalists that were mentioned in that story. I'm displaying my screen right now, and I'm on colememo.com/guest index. And if you click Tom Schuba or Stephanie Zimmerman, it will take you down to their section on my website, and you can see it says the interview can be found here. And if you click that, it will take you to my old episode from my old podcast with Stephanie and Tom, where we talk about their investigation into Illinois weed. Yeah,
I do think there's quite a few cases you could kind of throw back at that argument that because it's part of our CRTA tracking system, it is safer. There's more than just that pre-roll case, and in that case, they also said that the potency was also off. It wasn't just that it had mold; is that it wasn't as strong as they said it was, or it was stronger than they said it was. Both things that get thrown at hemp products as well.
Yeah, well said. And I've got that pulled up. We'll watch that. I want to watch that short report for people that aren't aware of it. But this is the quote I was thinking of just a moment ago. Edie Moore said, "It's absolutely about safety," right? That's what she says. But it's also about protecting businesses like mine, who these folks are competing with. She added, she went through a strenuous application process to open her cannabis shop and feels that others who didn't go through the process should not sell products that can cause intoxication. She said, quote, "They didn't spend the amount of time and the amount of money and do the amount of community work to get that business open. They just opened it," end quote. So I want to throw it over to the panel, but if in case people didn't know, Edie Moore is a founding member of the nonprofit Chicago NORML.
And has supported license caps since the beginning.
Yeah. And, you know, that's kind of what I think this is actually about. Like these public safety concerns come up. And like I say, this is a perfect opportunity to watch this short report from the Sun-Times that found that not only the testing labels were inaccurate, but there were moldy products on the shelves. Let's watch this video.
Sales booming in Illinois, we started with a simple question. What's in your weed? Sun-Times reporters spent months analyzing thousands of laboratory results for failing weed, which were filed with the State Department of Agriculture. The most frequent case of failing weed, too much yeast and mold. Experts told us pre-rolled joints can be vulnerable to such contamination.
Yeast and mold is probably the most famous around the country right now in the cannabis industry. It's the one test that a lot of people seem to have trouble with. Molds are spore-based. We're breathing in yeast right now. So if there's yeast in your air, there's going to be yeast on the product.
So we went shopping. We bought 10 samples at 8 dispensaries around Chicago and the suburbs. 9 were pre-rolls, 1 was fresh cannabis flower. We brought them to a state-approved cannabis testing lab for analysis, where the outside packaging was carefully opened and the samples dropped into the lab's sterile containers. Each sample was identified with a number and a letter. Here's what the lab found. 8 of the 9 pre-rolls tested above the state limits for at least one microbiological contaminant, such as yeast and mold, total viable aerobic bacteria, coliform bacteria, and bile-tolerant gram-negative bacteria. 4 tested above state limits for all of those. The fresh cannabis flower tested well under state limits for those contaminants. None of the 10 samples had detectable E. coli or salmonella, mycotoxins, or pesticide residue, and none of the samples exceeded state limits on heavy metals. Of special concern are a type of mold called aspergillus and mycotoxins, which are toxic compounds created by molds, neither of which were found in these tests.
Often if I get a flower sample in here, more than likely it's going to have like a mold colony or 2 on it. That's just telling me that we have mold, but it's probably not aspergillus because we're not seeing those mycotoxins coming.
We reached out to the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois for comment, and here's what we received. The safety and quality of cannabis products and the well-being of patients and consumers are top priorities of Illinois' medical and adult use cannabis industry. The Cannabis Business Association of Illinois will continue to work with regulators and other key stakeholders on the continued development of testing standards to ensure consumers are protected and continue to enjoy the highest quality products.
So, just kind of an interesting report from the past that, I think we should add the most important part that wasn't covered in that video that is covered in their text reporting that you can check out is that Illinois protects recall data, right? So even if the product is recalled, and I'm about to release an interview that I had with somebody who discusses purchasing obviously moldy cannabis that gave them a very bad health reaction, and the entire interaction with the state and the dispensary is just there's not really a process, I guess. It's just the short way of saying it. So, yeah. Well, okay. So I know that we have to get into this topic, and I think the best way to do this is to give a short recap on where we've been and what happened. And I've got the Pritzker presser pulled up and Welch's response, but I just remembered one other topic that I know we've addressed this in the past, but I'm telling you right now, this is what everybody gets snagged on with this topic. Like, I've got this soda right now from Can Trip. He says this is naturally infused. He is like really big. He's been on my podcast about it. He talks about it all over the place. He insists that he does not use converted cannabinoids. I'm trying to look where he says, like, he specifically says this is naturally derived THC from hemp. The point being, I just keep seeing these conversations about like converted cannabinoids, and I think that's another part of this narrative. And I just
well, it's like we were talking with Miggy the other day, and he brought up spice, and I was like, I don't think spice is at all.
It's not. Yeah,
like,
from what I understand, it's in
because we've talked about it before with Chris, and I think like you wouldn't call Delta 9 derived from CBD synthetic.
Yeah, it's not a fair comparison. Spice is like, it doesn't have a good safety profile. Like, the chemical itself doesn't have a good safety profile. Whereas like something like Delta 8, the molecule itself, like, there is no evidence to suggest that it doesn't have a good safety profile. Just like Delta 9 or any other cannabinoid, like, the cannabinoid itself isn't the problem. It's the process by which it's produced, and if it's not produced correctly, then it can have some contaminants in it, depending on the process that's used. But with like K2, it's like, it is actually a synthetic cannabinoid that like is something that doesn't ever naturally occur in nature, and your body doesn't really know what to do with it. So that, like, consuming it in large doses isn't really known what even is a large dose. And like, the same thing could kind of be said about cannabinoids too, but it's, there's no evidence out there that points to overconsumption ever being lethal, like you said earlier.
Well, and let's just put it this way: the lack of research on all of these cannabinoids has never stopped this movement from selling them. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of like the point we've always been making, is like, because it's not federally legal, there is no research and all this stuff. I mean, hemp is what started that. So, but you know what I mean? Like, that's. But okay, so what I have heard though is, and I think Adam has said this, and other people say this, it's like, when you convert CBD to THC, there are like other downstream chemical reactions that create things we don't even know about. Like, is there any truth to that?
Well, I think like there is something to be said about like naturally occurring blends of cannabinoids, right? Like and it's this, you could say the same thing about terpenes too. I don't know if you've ever had like terpene products, concentrated terpene products, but like, they can be overwhelming. They can be somewhat dangerous. Like, if you're over consuming something that's like in a much higher concentration than it would ever naturally occur, then it could have some effects on you that would be mostly the effects on you would be undesirable, and you would want to avoid that, and you could potentially get to some mix of cannabinoids that just makes you feel nauseous or something. Like, if it was like super high in some like specific mixture or ratio of minors that just didn't interact well, especially like, say if you were someone who takes an aspirin every day or something, and you might not even know that contraindication exists, because like, who knows like how much data is out there of people who take more than 75 milligrams of CBC daily, like,
right.
Who knows? So those types of interactions could exist with these like mother liquor type blends of cannabinoids where you're having all these conversions coming off of the base like CBD feedstock that you're using, and then it all, like, 57% of it becomes delta 9, and then 16% of it becomes delta 8, and like so on and so forth, until you have these all these different mixtures. And say you have a customer who only wants the THC. Okay, now you have this other mixture which is like mostly THC free, but it's just a blend of other minors and D8. And yeah, you start making, you figure out how to make products with this, and maybe blend it back in with CBD from another source or something like that. And all of these should be viable, like, opportunities to make money and to provide people with products that they might enjoy, as long as they're reasonably safe, like they're not contaminated, which is totally doable. Yeah, it is doable, and it's not. You just have to make sure it's clean before you start selling it. And I don't think anybody would disagree with, like, there has to be a checkpoint at that point. Like, once the conversion is done, let's have a checkpoint. Let's test the product before it starts getting mixed in with all this other stuff.
It does feel like people are trying to like paint a broad brush with this term synthetic, which, like, yes, technically there's like synthesis going on with chemicals, but like this is not a like designer, like, because this stuff is derived from CBD, it's not like some designer drug like spice. Like, these are the same compounds. Like, you can, like, I've heard people talk about how scientists have found you can brew THC with yeast. Is that a synthetic cannabinoid? Just because it wasn't taken from the plant? Like THCO, I think we've talked about, doesn't occur naturally, I think. Like, that would be actually synthetic because there is no example of that in nature.
Yeah, that's like when you start talking about like legal definitions of chemical processes, and you start talking about the word synthetic. Like, yeah, synthetic is something that does not occur in nature. It must be man-made. Just like on the periodic table of elements, you have a whole bunch of elements that don't exist in nature, really. And it's the same thing with this. Like, that's actually a good analogy for these cannabinoids that don't ever exist in nature either. And maybe at some point through breeding and genetics, you might be able to get there, like, naturally. And yeah, I think like you said with the example with the yeast, like that I would call that like biosynthesis, right? Like you used an organism to, I mean, it's probably GMO at that point too. But you used an organism to produce it, so it's not like I mean, and I don't know, and that I think that's an exciting frontier for industrial development of the crop in general. And as we get into this content with the attempted regulations and the governor and the speaker of the house and stuff, I think this kind of stuff holds those like opportunities back, like to be using yeasts and bacteria and figuring out how to produce this stuff on a massive scale so that we can just leave all this like drama behind us.
Well, and like, that's not like a freaky thing. Like, isn't that how like things like Tylenol are made?
Oh yeah, I mean,
like that, like those are like naturally occurring, like they were found somewhere in nature, but then there's like a process that they use in a lab to like make this stuff.
Sure, yeah. Antibiotics definitely is one of them. I did some work at a place that made medicated animal feed, and that's how they did it, was like a fermentation, some type of like biofermentation, and it was nasty. But that's the process. Like, there's a lot of nasty things in industry, but if the product in the end works for the market, then that's the whole point. Like, there is no waste in industry. There's just another opportunity.
Yeah, I think there definitely is like some confusion over synthetic and synthesized, and I've used this analogy with a couple people before, where it's like, we can synthesize wool out of plastic. or we can make synthetic wool out of plastic rather. But we can also use wool to synthesize like other organic textiles. So like there's a difference between those words, synthetic and synthesized. And I think they just get used interchangeably, and they just don't mean the same thing.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the points that has been made in the past, I believe, is that, you know, if we want to get technical, it's like a lot of the caffeine we consume is arguably, you could like make this same argument that I started with about THC, converting CBD to THC, like, and what are the downstream, what are the other things that come out of this mixture? And like, I think Chris, you addressed it, but it's like you say, you test to make sure that there aren't any unknowns in there. I don't know. It's an interesting thought. Like I said, it seems like we're accepting of it with caffeine, you know? But it's like, I wonder, like, it's like the concept of unknown unknowns, you know? Like I said, to me, like, I've asked different hemp producers, and like I say, sometimes somebody's really particular and he insists that it's naturally derived D9. I don't know like how I prove that, if I like have to just like follow him through the whole process, you know, or you know. But I've had other producers where I've tried their drinks and they've told me, yeah, we're converting this from CBD to D9, and just personally, I don't notice a difference in the experience. And what I've been told is like there is no molecular difference from hemp derived D9, you know, and D9 from marijuana, because of course it's just all the same. So again, I wanted to just address that on the front end, because it's like I feel like sometimes people, like, if we just dive right in, people like might just like, I don't know. I think it's important to address that, because it's like I said at the start of this, I feel like it's the only thing that really hangs people up on this. So any other thoughts on that before we start with like a recap of what happened this last session? I've got the videos queued up and everything, but just any other thoughts on that subject in general? I didn't want to move on if people had thoughts. No. Cool. Well, where do we want to start with this? You know, I thought it'd be interesting to go through and watch the Pritzker presser. We've got a really quick video of Speaker Welch responding to some of the things that Pritzker said in the presser. So like, and you know, we can do all that in it's a 15-minute runtime, so we can pause, you know, along the way. But before we do that, how should we set the stage here? Like, I think it's important to remind people maybe Senate Bill 4293 and how it went through the Senate. Let's give a brief recap on that. Who wants to? Anybody? I can try, but I don't feel confident right now.
I'll give you the recap.
Sweet, Chris. Thanks.
You're welcome. So HB 4293. This was introduced in the Senate on May 22nd. And it was passed in the Illinois Senate on May 26th. And in that time on May 26th, after that, it was passed to the House of Representatives, and it sat in the House of Representatives until the end of the spring legislative session.
And I just wanted to say, you know, I think it's important to remind people that it started as the Massage Therapy Act. It's just like a small detail. But
Yeah. Typically in Illinois, you know, if you follow the Constitution, you don't reveal for the first time legal language and then expect it to become law within 4 days. That's normally not how the process works. And yeah, in this case, it was you could call it gut and replace or shell bill, or there's like many phrases for what's done here. It's like they have lots of bills that just kind of sit and have been read a few times. Like that's what's required, is they need to be read on separate days. And then they will amend it, and it basically just like cuts everything, brings in all new language, and so they'll do this with hundreds of pages of legal language, similar to what they did with the HB 4293, and then within a few days they put it up for a vote across both chambers of Congress and the whole General Assembly, and they expect that anyone who's interested has already given feedback, in which they've said that anyone who's interested has given feedback. But anyway, this bill HB 4293 had a lot of issues with it. It was bad for the hemp industry. The Illinois Hemp Growers Association was there to demonstrate against it on the last day of the legislative session. We were also there during the veto session, which it didn't seem like it would come up again. We heard when we visited the Capitol during the veto session that things may come to a head during the lame duck, and it very much was the case. So, like I said, back in May, it passed the Senate, and this is what's known as the 103rd General Assembly. It passed the Senate in the 103rd General Assembly, and through the spring session, that's where it stayed. It didn't pass the House. Then in the veto session, which happened in October and into November, it didn't get brought up for a vote either in the House, which is still, this is the veto session of the 103rd General Assembly. Then you have the lame duck session, which is just at the tail end of the 103rd General Assembly going into the 104th General Assembly, where several representatives have changed. I think maybe 10 or 12 representatives and senators left their seats and were replaced. So during this lame duck session, which was just at the very beginning of January of this year, what they tried to do and what the governor tried to do, and the leader of the Senate, Senator Lightford, tried to do was use the votes from May that had passed in the Senate, even though the bill kind of failed pretty miserably in the House at that time. They tried to use the votes from the Senate back in May to pass a bill through the House, to persuade as many House representatives as they could to pass this bill through the House in January. And if they couldn't do it, then the bill would eventually lose its passage in the Senate, because the 104th General Assembly started on January 8th, so the 103rd ended on January 7th. That was the last possible day they could have done it. We did a rally at the Capitol on January 4th. We got the news that the bill was pretty much dead. They didn't have the votes for it on January 6th, I think. So this press conference that we're going to look at from Governor Pritzker and Leader Lightford was prior to the lame duck session starting, I'm pretty sure. And then we also have correct me if I'm wrong, Cole, and then we also have a clip of the sort of aftermath from Speaker Chris Welch, where it's you have a press conference with Leader Lightford and Governor Pritzker.
No, we actually covered that in the past. So I will. You came on and we all covered that in the past. So I'll link that in the show notes for those of you that want to check out the episodes that we've done in the past. Check out episode number 152, episode 141, episode 96, episode 81, and episode 62. We've really been covering all of the happenings with regard to this topic for quite some time. And for those reasons, I'll encourage you to check out those episodes if you'd like to get a deeper dive on some of the events that have happened in the past. But yeah, we're going to watch the Pritzker one. But before we do that, I actually just wanted to play this little clip at a podcast that I heard. I'd been wondering this while we were there, because we had heard word that JB was on foot, doing some lobbying efforts, which I thought was interesting, right? To say the least. And let's just play this clip, because I was wondering, is this normal? And this is from Springfield WMAY 92.7 FM. Great podcast if you want to listen to it. Here we
Passionate about it. He does not often put his thumb on the scale on pending legislation. He often will defer, like, well, that's in the legislature, and we'll consider it when it gets here. But he pulled out all the stops. I mean, he called in legislators to the mansion, tried to kind of wine and dine them, and it's a big loss, especially because at the end, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, comes in and lobbies against it. So then now the perception is it's a mayor versus governor, and the governor loses it to the mayor, and that's never a great thing. But to your point about the staff.
So that last part, I really, I think the media has kind of glammed onto the governor versus mayor thing, but I really think the bigger thing is governor versus Speaker of the House. They don't seem like they're on the same page, and that's what we're about to get into with this press conference now.
Or I also think it's interesting just the fact that like the opposition to this hemp bill seems to have been sowed with his failure in the original CRTA. Like there's enough people at this point that are unhappy with that original law that they like don't trust him on this thing. That's the part I think is kind of fascinating.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, and we're going to hear the Speaker of the House even say that. To hear somebody that prominent in politics kind of question the success of the CRTA was, I don't want to say a first, but it's been a while since I've heard any critique of it. That's what I'll say. So when we watch this video, I just want to say that, I don't know, I won't get too into it, but the audio is like, I think it's a noise canceling mic, so you can't really hear the questions, but fortunately, Capital Facts Illinois produced a transcript, so I will play the role of reporter and ask Governor Pritzker questions while we watch this video, because you can't hear the questions that are being asked. So let's share my screen and watch this video. The question was, first, your reaction to House Bill 4293 not being called in the House, and secondly, why do you think your team were unable to whip the support needed for the Speaker to put it on the board?
Well, maybe we ought to start with what the purpose of the bill was, which was to protect children and families and adults and the people of Illinois from very unsafe, intoxicating hemp products that are sold without regard to the age of the purchaser, without regard to the ingredients that are inside those packages, that are being sold at convenience stores and at gas stations, and that we already have seen children go to the hospital for, and adults too. And I talked to a mother of a daughter who took one of these packages, didn't understand how intoxicating the package was, and ended up passed out, ended up in the hospital, has been in and out of the hospital now for 8 months as a result of just this product that looked, for all respects, as if it were candy. Some of these products, if you've ever seen them, it'll say Skittles on the front with a Z on the end. They're not Skittles like the ones that you know, but rather this intoxicating hemp. So what we're trying to do is keep people protected from products like that. This is about consumer safety and health. I was tremendously disappointed that this is a demonstration, from my perspective, of
So could you pause it there? So are we good to pause while he's doing this, right? Or okay.
Absolutely. Encouraged.
Yeah.
Encouraged.
So he's saying the main point of the bill is public safety. But the public safety is like just a very small part of this bill. The bigger part of this bill is putting it into dispensaries, only allowing dispensaries to do this stuff. And he makes absolutely no mention of that. So the governor's priority is to protect children, protect people. There's a lot of people have in the House have called for a standalone bill that does exactly that. So I would love to see the governor push for a standalone public safety bill that does exactly that and doesn't have all of these controversial provisions in it that are playing favorites with different people and licenses and groups across or all around the state, and even Chicago shouldn't even be much of a part of the equation here. We need to looking at the state level first and setting a minimum, a floor, and not going into playing with all these other concepts that they're not related to public safety. You'll hear people talking about taxes. You'll hear people talking about new licenses. You'll hear people talking about limiting the amount of cannabinoids or the type of cannabinoids that can be sold, or like he talks about the copycat products like the Skittles. Like, none of these has anything to do with public safety. The only thing that has to do with public safety is the product clean and is it age gated, and if you have that, then you're good. So we don't need a complicated bill for that. A standalone bill would easily solve that issue. So if we take that issue off the table, what else are you fighting for here? And I think that's a good place to let it go and to kind of watch the rest of what he says.
Well, also, I just saw a thing yesterday that Mars was again like following up some lawsuit against this group Terp Hogs, who are like behind the Skittles name. It's like that stuff is already illegal and can already be sued out of existence or enforced out of existence. And also this story about this girl who was in the hospital in and out for 8 months, like, you might want to report that woman to the police and have them check if that's like a Gypsy Rose Munchausen situation, because it's definitely not the cannabis that has her going back to the hospital after 8 months.
Well, I think you can leave a big stretch of time out in there where, okay, yeah, maybe she got so high she passed out, but was she driving at the time? Like, was she skydiving or something? Like, did she then suffer an accident, which then led to her being in and out of the hospital for 8 months? If that's the case, then you could say that's correlation versus causation, right? So I don't know, these anecdotes, like, that's really all you ever hear out of people who are proponents of this type of legislation, is just like the anecdotes. And I talked to a mother of a daughter. Okay, yeah, that's usually how it works, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had one on the other day that they were like, these kids, they were 21, I think, or maybe 22, but I definitely confirmed they were 21 and up, bought these from a gas station and they got really high. And I was like, really? That sounds pretty fun, and that's like, and I asked, though, did they mean to do that? Like, it wasn't a mistake, right? Like, they didn't accidentally get Skittles or whatever. And he was like, oh no, they were trying to get high. They just got too high. And I'm just like, that's a lesson. Sometimes I've gotten too drunk, I don't know. Like, and I learned not to do that anymore because I don't like how that feels.
Exactly. Yeah. They'll learn that 100 milligrams is probably too much and maybe I should do 10. But that sounds like a first time experience, which exactly from there you dial it back. I think most people, and like you said, if you're seeking this out, like, it's almost like we're talking about like retailers selling hemp and people consuming hemp both being mandatory here. Like, if it was mandatory, then I could understand this, but it's not.
Right. It's your choice, So that's great point. Like, the whole thing about the synthetic thing, it's like, are a bunch of people being duped into getting like, if, again, there, as you said, Delta 8 is, well studied, and if people look up like Delta 8, there's a lot of research actually on that. But it's like, I don't understand this idea that somebody's just going in and getting like THCP or like THCO or like, I don't know. Usually like it just seems to me cannabis consumers like are a little bit smarter than that. Like, they've smoked weed before, so you're not gonna, they're looking for flower or they're looking for an edible. Anyways, though, we can get back into this.
And the money that they spread around, pointed that this is a demonstration, from my perspective, of the power of special interests and the money that they spread around. to thwart health and safety of the public. And, you know, this was the choice by a number of people to, you know, go for profits over people. And I was disappointed to see that. Now, I want to be clear. If this had come up for a vote, if the speaker had called this would have passed with a supermajority. We know that the vast majority of Democrats were in favor of it, and the vast majority of Republicans were in favor of it. The fact that it didn't get called a bipartisan bill to safeguard the people of the.
Well, I was going to say, I pulled up that article about political contributions, and it's rich for a billionaire to talk about spreading money around and special interests. This man literally, what is it? The billionaire governor who championed Illinois' cannabis legalization also lobbed major campaign cash in October, sending contributions of $50,000 apiece to dozens of Democratic lawmakers, including more than $2 million to funds controlled by the Speaker of the House. Like, that is a lot of money when you look at political contributions in the grand, like, you know, the scale of what people get.
Yeah, and then it's like that's just classic projection type stuff, right? Like, and still, again, no mention of all of the other economic favoritism of the bill. Just purely, oh, this is all public health, public health, public health. It's people aren't safe, people aren't safe. Still no mention of it. And yeah, this when I first saw this one, I was like, I thought that quote from him saying we had a super majority and we had a majority of Republicans and a majority of Democrats. I could see a majority of Democrats because there's 78 Democrats in the House, right? So I could see that you had maybe 40 of them, sure. But the rest, like the Republicans and then a good chunk of Democrats, they weren't having it at all. So you maybe have 40 votes and the rule of 60, right? So that's, I guess, I don't know if Speaker Welch mentions it in his conference, but the rule of 60, you didn't even get to 60. So for the governor to come out and talk about a super majority, and then yeah, like you said, with all the money he sling around, like you can hear how upset he is about it. Because that's, you know, I don't know, maybe this is not money wasted. This is it's money that is not specifically related to a single issue. It's more or less you vote with the governor, the money, the contributions continue to flow, right? So like when he tells you that this is when he, like they said, when he puts his thumb on the scale, these are the people that roll over to that side of the scale first, and it again, maybe you had 40 people, but yeah, there's another 78 that were probably a hard no, and I think the momentum was against the bill, and they were continuing to lose support for the bill all the way up until the end, which is, I mean, it died days early. It died early, like it died on Monday. The session was alive until noon on Wednesday, and by Monday it was over.
Can I ask, do you think, you know, I've seen people already saying, reporters and even, you know, advocates in the space with the social media presence, that the hemp bill killed the cannabis omnibus bill?
That we've heard that a few times before too, like other, like they, like again, it seems like they bundle it all together, like all of the reps and the General Assembly. It's like, well, if we're going to do anything cannabis related, we have to do every single cannabis related bill all in one day, and if one of them holds up the works, then nothing will ever get done. And I don't know why it seems like it's like that. It's a shame for that to be an excuse, for hemp to be an excuse to not do other reforms to the the marijuana industry. Like, they definitely need them.
Yeah, they've literally passed one additional law concerning cannabis after the CRTA, which was mainly just to fix stuff that was terrible, that were like mistakes they made. So it is not
Well,
Hemp's fault that they haven't passed an omnibus bill.
and the only other one they've passed, Phil, is where they took the money from the medical cannabis fund, and they also eliminated their 280E at a state level.
Oh, right. Yeah.
In one fellow's swoop, which favored everybody that was already selling. I mean, and again, there was, you could argue there's a downstream effect that helps people that would sell in the future because they don't have to deal with 280E at a state level. But I just think it's interesting how things like that can get done. But yeah, I just wanted to try to address that. Like, I've already heard people saying that, it's Hemp's fault that cannabis stuff can't get done anymore. It's like, yeah. Well, let's watch this, and we'll have the Welch's response is pretty short.
Bill to safeguard the people of the state of Illinois is a tragedy.
She asks, are you considering whether to instruct IDPH to interpret the Illinois Food and Drug Act defining hemp products to be an intoxicating substance?
We're looking at all the options that are available to me in the executive branch to secure the safety and health of the people from these intoxicating hemp products. And I want to make clear to everybody, because I know the other side on this, people who are advocating for these packages to be just available to everybody, that they've been making the case that we're going to shut down CBD oil or these shops that are good actors that are just selling products that come from hemp, which, by the way, I signed a bill to legalize in the state to make sure that the hemp products could be sold here safely. And they found a loophole to jump through. But the people who are doing it safely and who are providing products that many people use day to day are not the ones who are at fault here. It's others. And so I want to make sure that we're using every possible power that I have in the executive branch to deal with it, but it does take legislation to do some of the things we need done.
And I just wanted to say, like, that whole, before I read this next question, I've got it queued up. Like, it is, Phil, you made a great point earlier about how much money he threw around, and I think it's, like, interesting in that same report, and I've got it pulled up. I'll have it linked in the show notes so people can do the math themselves as well, and you can always look on Illinois Sunshine to, like, look up these figures yourself. But, like, I'm seeing, like, $10,000, like, from the hemp side to $9,000, $10,000. And when you consider, selfish plug for my mini doc, that one of the things we cover that they've contributed over like $800,000. And then, like Phil just mentioned, you got the governor throwing around a few million. What'd you say there? How many?
Yeah, it was like $2 million just to funds controlled by Chris Welch, but then he gave like 50,000 to like dozens of other people.
Yeah. So there's, like, I don't know, I feel like the money flying around from the cannabis side of the aisle really does pale. Am I wrong? Does it pale? Like, it's hard to, I will say it's hard to do the math on that. That's why in the mini doc I say they've donated at least that much money, because even the Chicago Tribune report that I used to source most of that math, and then the math I did myself, like, that's just what you can see. Like,
you're saying the money hemp is throwing around at this point pales in comparison to the money that cannabis and someone like Pritzker is throwing around.
I'm saying that, yes. Yeah. At least what we know for sure. Like, the cannabis money, that we know of is a large figure, but the Tribune said it might be even larger if we had more transparency around, like, who are tied to the licenses in the state of Illinois, Admittedly, when I recorded this episode, I was absolutely baked. This is the story that I was referring to by the Chicago Tribune. If you'd like to look it up yourself, I'll read out the headline. The headline is, "Who's profiting off the millions the Illinois marijuana business is bringing in? State officials are keeping that secret." If you scroll to the bottom of the article, I'm going to read from this paragraph. That 610-page law, which is the cannabis law they're referring to, was rewritten several times during the waning days of the spring 2019 session. As lawmakers rushed to cut a deal, much of the focus was on who got a slice of the pie. The recreational pot law's sponsors, Chicago Democrats Staines and Cassidy, said they had intended for the public to be able to get ownership information. Cassidy said she plans to push for legislation this spring to allow for more disclosure. Reminder that this article was written sometime, I believe, in 2020. I'll confirm that in a moment. The Pritzker administration declined to make their state marijuana czar, then Toy Hutchinson, available for an interview. In a statement, she said the state would, quote, ensure that the laws reflect our intent to be transparent about owners of cannabis businesses, end quote. According to the Chicago Tribune, the lack of information makes it difficult to know whether clout-heavy entrepreneurs or big political donors are winning licenses. Even without detailed information, the Tribune used public records elsewhere to find cultivation businesses linked to more than $630,000 in campaign contributions since January 2017. And this is the part that I was referring to. That number undoubtedly would soar if more information were made public in Illinois. This is really the point I was trying to make when I brought up the Chicago Tribune reporting. I do want to read this interesting response that was included in the article. It says, the lack of transparency also means it's hard to determine whether questionable people are working their way into a state-licensed business. Pamela Altoff, then executive director of the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois, suggested that's the obligation of state regulators, not journalists. The Tribune report continues by saying, but the public needs to look no further than the gambling industry for examples of regulators falling short. And you can look into that more. I definitely recommend checking out this article. I'll have it in the show notes. I just wanted to quickly confirm that article was written in 2020. Again, it'll be listed in the show notes. And to put it very shortly, the reason that I brought this article up was because it seems like that's a real difference between hemp licensing and cannabis licensing. Right now, you can go online and see everybody that is licensed for hemp in the state of Illinois, who is tied to that license, who applied for that license. The same cannot be said of cannabis licenses in Illinois. I just think we need a little bit more transparency around that. Back to the episode.
Well, before you start back up again, he what did he say?
We're looking at all the options available to me in the executive branch.
Yeah, exactly. He's talking about using some type of executive order to order the Department of Health to say something's intoxicating. And he's like, he obviously had no familiarity with that suggestion. It seems like whoever suggested that, maybe they thought that was like a realistic possibility, but if it was a possibility, they probably already would have done it over the last 6 years, seeing as how it's been this way for 6 years. And he said, I signed this bill into law, and I thought it was Governor Rauner who actually signed this one into law. Or at least it passed under Rauner, and then maybe Rauner didn't sign it until Pritzker got in. So like all of the work on this was done, and it was handed to him on a silver platter, like many other things. So when he signed it and he takes credit for it, it's like super, super rich to be like, I signed the bill, therefore like I am the guardian of its intent. And yeah, it's just ridiculous, but not surprising for someone like him to be like taking credit for something like that. But yeah, if you had the power to unilaterally get what you want, you would have already done it, man.
Well, do you think that their opinion might have changed at all because of what like Gavin Newsom did in California?
It may be, but that didn't happen without legislative action, just like
I thought that was just an executive order.
I'm not super familiar with the latest there. So
It was essentially in like October, I think he did like an executive order to like ban hemp products, and then the court upheld it. But I don't know how much like political opposition there was to that kind of thing in California. Like it seems like there's like genuine political opposition to trying to corral all the hemp under the cannabis industry in this state because our industry is so monopolized and kind of small. Like I wonder if they have like reticence to do it because of pushback they would get.
Well, I think maybe it's just easier to ban it than it is to try to take it. It's like it just seems more hypocritical maybe to be like, well, you can't have it but we can, whereas like in California they were like just blanket no, like it's over. Maybe it's just it's easier to get more support for that. But yeah, I wish I was more familiar with how it went down. I did pay attention to the California stuff for a while, but Illinois has just been overwhelmingly active over the last few months.
Yeah. Governor, what are your thoughts on yesterday's House Democratic Caucus meeting, particularly in regard to what happened with your staffers?
So for those of you who don't know, we were invited to bring our experts from our departments to the House Democratic Caucus meeting to present to the members and to answer questions of the members. These are professionals. These are really top-notch professionals. No political anything involved. They literally were there to answer questions and to provide information.
I want to just stop there for a second because I don't want to get too caught up in this. I want to allow him to finish the statement. But like when you say no political or anything involved, like they were signed on. If it's his staffers, his cannabis staffers, most of them were signed on as proponents of the legislation 4293. And like I feel like that is inherently political. Like everything if you're whipping votes, like that's inherently political, you know.
The CROO has literally held joint events with the executive director of the Cannabis Business Association. Like, is she doing joint events with the Illinois Hemp Growers Association? Is David Lakeman doing joint events with the hemp growers?
Well, to be fair, David Lakeman showed up for a J-CAR hearing on hemp regulations. But you know, the departments, the agencies don't have they have little to do with this. Like they are working to the guidelines that they're given. Their interpretation is one thing, but like specifically with the Department of Ag, it's like they have to do what USDA says. They can go above and beyond what USDA says, and in some cases they do, cases that I don't necessarily agree with, and that would our membership would benefit from removing these cases. But the people who are moving legislation, who are responsible for introducing legislation and getting support for legislation, those are the people that need to bring groups like ours into the conversation. Understand, I think hearings need to happen. Like hearings in the House need to happen. Subject matter hearings, agriculture hearings, like these type of hearings need to happen in the House this session, and they need to sit us down. They need to sit anyone who's got subject matter expertise and who's been dealing with this for years should sit and talk and provide testimony and put testimony on the public record that is undeniable. That's part of the strategy of gut and replace, is to limit activity like that and to limit the opportunity for people to oppose. So that's where our focus is as the hemp growers. And the agencies, like we try to work with the agencies. We'll work with the agencies as much as we possibly can, and I think they feel the same way. And
and I mean, I remember David Lakeman, I think, was at one of your events in the past that I was at the University of Illinois. Since I just was thinking about that, since Phil asked the direct question, has he ever come to like an event, or somebody like him come to an event with hemp growers. You know, that's an example I can think of. Is my memory correct on that one?
Y-
Didn't he
Jared
come out?
Garlish was at the UIC Hemp Open House.
Not this year, but like last year, I thought. Maybe it was just on the
Um,
poster. I don't know.
you know, they had IHGA come out to the state fair and do hemp education a couple years back in the IDOA tent. But no, I mean, I think Jared, when he was new, and probably David too, I think we invited them to a couple virtual meetings
Yep.
that they showed up for, to just share about, you know, how the IDOA can help people get their license, or what the protocol is. So yeah, you know, they've definitely showed up when we've asked them to. Yeah.
Yeah,
You
but it's
know,
always just a very general sort of town hall, sort of how do I get started type of interaction there. And usually when we start digging into the subject matter, it's more or less like, well, we send us an email and we'll investigate for you or come up with an answer for you. And usually the answer involves just kind of quoting back regulation at you. So that, you know, that provides an opportunity for us to come in and help people navigate that regulation. But sorry, Cole, go ahead.
no, I rolled it back a little bit because we had talked for a second and he had just started his statement. I didn't mean to get so caught up in that little thing, but like this is inherently political because we're talking about like supporting a bill and sending your regulators in to like whip votes. You know what I mean? We'll watch the rest of this.
No political anything involved. They literally were there to answer questions and to provide information. And they were berated by people who were opposed to the bill. They were berated. They were called liars. They were treated extremely poorly. One of my staff people had to get up and leave because she felt ganged up upon and called a liar and pointed at. And I mean, it was frightening for her. And so I have to say, treating staff people like that, I mean, politicians can take it. Politicians are, you know, should be made of enough steel to deal with. These are professionals, and that we want to attract to state government. We want to stay in state government. To have them treated poorly by elected officials is, frankly, unacceptable. And I told that to the speaker. I have made it clear that people owe my staff, those staff people, I say my staff, these are people working in our departments, they are owed apologies by the people who impugned their honesty.
Now, I think I'm going to skip past this because we're talking about Chicago for a second.
I'd like to say that
I'm going to skip forward. Any thoughts on what was just said while I move the tape forward?
He says this unacceptable. So, you know, what's the recourse there? You could say it's unacceptable, but if you're sending people in to just push, like, essentially red herring, like Skittles, if they're coming in with their evidence being, I talked to a mother of a daughter who was in the hospital, and also Skittles, and you're saying that you need to, you know, upend the livelihood and stability of, you know, hundreds or maybe thousands of businesses in the state because you're hearing stories. Many people say this, right? Like this is like a classic Trump move. Like all the people are saying it. I hear that everyone's saying this. Like that. Like it's not convincing. Like, and if you sent your staffers in to the House floor with that same rhetoric, no wonder they got torn to shreds. And it has to be done somewhere. And if it's not, if you're not going to give the public the opportunity to do it, then the representatives are going to do it. And what happened to separation of powers here? Like this is the executive it's more than putting your thumb on the scale here.
Yeah. So the next question is, how much influence do you think Mayor Johnson had with the hemp bill's demise? And do you think House Democrats lied to you about their votes on the hemp bill? Do you think maybe they had different positions?
No, in fact, I mean, I don't think people lied. I mean, I'd like to think that people didn't lie to us. They told us that they would vote for it, and indeed, there were many, many people ready to vote for it. And as I told you, if you put this up to a vote, you get a majority of Democrats and a majority of Republicans that would vote for it. And this is an important issue. So I wish it had been called. I think that I think not calling it was irresponsible.
And on Mayor Johnson. Somebody
mayor,
asked. Sorry, I'm going to repeat that.
It was only
Somebody,
mildly irresponsible to not call the bill, but it was unacceptable to make his staffers upset.
right. Yeah, I also think it's interesting that he didn't he pinned it all on the speaker of the House in terms of not keeping the not, I don't know. That was just an interesting statement.
Well, you think about it. Everyone in the whole Capitol knows the rule of 60, right? So if you call a bill, then everyone assumes that you got 60. And even if you don't got 60, you still have this random chaotic chance. You've still kind of affected people in a way in which they believe that there's probably 60 votes, so they should probably vote with the party if they don't want to seem like they're not on the governor's favorites list. I think it's kind of underhanded on multiple levels to coerce the speaker into calling a bill when everyone knows the rule of 60. The rule of 60 is it's common knowledge, and they won't officially comment that it's an official rule, but it's common knowledge. If we know about it, everyone knows about it, and it's been a thing for a long time, since the Madigan days. So to get a bill called, again, you're muddying the water by doing that and then not actually having the votes.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on what he said here? Phil, you got any thoughts about just what happened with the staffers and stuff?
Well, I just think it's funny, from what Rachel and Chris said, they had heard that he'd never really gotten this involved on this was his first time really getting really involved with calling people directly and trying to get this thing to move. And I just think it failing is really bad for him.
Strange hill to die on.
I don't know. I've always been suspicious of the guy because I hate the CRTA. He's done some good stuff, but it just makes you wonder how much of that has been his own initiative and stuff that he's been able to get done, and how much he's just been coasting.
Yeah, like you said, we've talked about this on the podcast together, Phil. We're a fan of some things, we're not totally anti JB. I'm happy with the progress we've made, but the progress, like you said, it's at what cost, I don't know. I just really have problems with him on cannabis policy. I know that they're dealing with a lot.
Well, apparently other people do too, Cole, and they're in the House.
Yeah. Straight up. So, I can pull this back up. So what had been asked after he made that statement was, they basically asked, and on Mayor Johnson?
My impression is he didn't have much to do with this. There's a powerful lobby that has been, working against this bill for quite some time. This was not an easy bill. If it had been, it would have passed last May. When it passed the Senate, they would have passed it in the House. They worked hard in the House to keep it from getting a vote in May, and in December, I let people know that I thought it was important for us to get this done this year, because every day that goes by, there are people buying these products, and there are people whose health is being put in danger with these products. And so like I said, it's a tragedy that the bill didn't pass. The mayor had very little to do with the ultimate result. I think there was a raucous meeting of the Democratic House caucus in which there was a lot of yelling at staff by people who were opposed to the bill that the speaker did not intervene about. And you shouldn't let staff get berated like that. You just shouldn't.
So no more cannabis questions on this video.
Now, did it seem like it was LaShawn Ford that was doing the yelling? Because that was like in the article I read, it was something about he reached out to apologize, but I don't know if that was like just in general or.
I think I read that somewhere too. And I also looked up this California thing, and you're right. Like, it definitely is very similar.
Yeah, people Google Gavin Newsom California hemp ban if you want to learn more about that. And if you've got something pulled up you want to share your screen on, I think that option should display for you if you do. I've got this short video though that's Chris Welch. It has Chris Welch on it and kind of includes his response to what was kind of said in that press conference. I think this is a really good report.
Pending budget shortfall with requests for help coming from all corners of the state. Illinois lawmakers are preparing for a busy couple of months in Springfield.
And WGN political reporter Tamon Bradley spoke with House Speaker Emmanuel Chris Welch today about what lies ahead.
Tense moments already in 2025 between three of the state's most powerful politicians, Governor Pritzker, Mayor Johnson, and House Speaker Welch. Welch sat down with us today to discuss priorities for the state and Chicago. To enact his progressive agenda, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson is looking to Springfield for an assist. But the powerful Speaker of the Illinois House, Emmanuel Chris Welch, is warning Johnson that money's tight.
The mayor of Chicago and mayors all across the state will have to come to us with realistic expectations. They can't expect to hear us say no from time to time. We're entering into this budget season with a $3.1 billion projected deficit. That's billion with a B.
Last week, Governor Pritzker slammed Mayor Johnson and his team for not developing good relationships in Springfield. Welch calls Johnson a very good friend whom he'd like to help if the mayor would get specific about what he wants.
I need to know what his wish list is. What's his ask? Let me help you deliver what we can. What is that? I don't know, but let's have that conversation.
To help Johnson and close the budget hole, Welch is not ready to endorse raising the state income tax.
People don't want us talking about taxes right now.
Also last week, Speaker Welch got into a dust-up with Governor Pritzker. Welch decided not to bring to the floor a Pritzker-backed bill that would regulate increasingly common hemp products, including ban the sale of synthetic THC gummies to children. The governor thought he had 60 House Democratic votes for the measure. Welch says that's not true.
It wasn't even close. The governor gave us a roll call. He knew beforehand that we were going to verify that roll call, and that roll call wasn't even close.
The governor told reporters that during a private House Democratic caucus, officials from his administration were verbally abused by lawmakers, and he blames Welch for not intervening. Why did the governor's members of his team leave out of that meeting in tears?
Well, listen, the governor wasn't present in our caucus meeting, and it got a little emotional. I did talk to those members immediately after caucus, and it's my understanding they reached out to those staffers immediately after I talked to them. Caucus, it gets emotional sometimes.
Welch says tensions ran high due to lingering bad feelings about the lack of minority ownership in the legal cannabis system.
There's a perception that the social equity program was not done correctly in the cannabis space. And here we have an industry where there are a lot of black and brown owners currently in existence. And the legislation that's currently proposed would literally put those people out of business right now. And it would turn it over to the cannabis people.
Welch told us before Springfield provides Chicago's regional transit operators.
So comforting to hear him say that.
I was a little bit too down to earth and realistic and making sense there. It's the most any politician has ever made sense on any clip you've ever played on any episode I've been on with you, Cole.
Phil, what part were you referring to that was refreshing?
Well, just the end where he talks about the hostility, the heightened emotion comes from lingering resentment over what happened with the CRTA. I just think there must be some sort of groundswell in the Democratic caucus where he knows there's enough of a constituency that feels that way that he's expressing that. Because up until now, this is the only legislative session where I've heard any elected official say anything other than Illinois is the most socially equitable cannabis in the country. We're making so much money and all these black and brown people are so successful and involved in the industry. This is just comforting to hear.
Yeah, he definitely chose his words carefully, though. He said, "There's a perception." He didn't say how many members or like if it was a majority or what, but there's a perception out there that that is the case, and yeah, it's definitely growing.
Yeah, I thought that part was really notable too. You don't hear that often. Like you said, Phil, I think you pretty well drilled that point home because, like, yeah, just interesting to hear. The other thing, it's like, so who's telling the truth here? Because Governor Pritzker said the votes were there. I've heard other people say the votes were there, that were involved. But I've also heard other people that were there that the votes weren't there. And Chris Welch says that, so it's like, this is just an interesting thing. I like the way he said it. Like, the votes were there. Believe me, if he would have just called it, I thought that was an interesting way of, like,
But also, wouldn't the Speaker of the House know better? Like, the governor doesn't work in the House.
And also, if the votes were there, why did somebody leave the room crying? You know what I mean? Like, why was there shouting? Like,
I was going to say, like, according to the IHGA, we knew the votes weren't there. We've been working on this for years. People have been talking to their reps for years, especially this last year, making sure that they knew what was up and that this bill was no good for their farms, for their retail shops, for their licensed businesses. So it was really affirming. It was frustrating to hear the governor say that he was so certain that they had all the votes. But it was really affirming to hear the Speaker of the House affirm what we know is true. And we've been, sorry, my dog's flopping back there. What we know is true, that the constituency has been in contact with their reps, and they know better. So it was good.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
He's got such a soothing voice.
He really does. I feel like he could read books.
Yeah.
A good audiobook voice for sure. I thought it was interesting to read I've got the link for this, but the quote that stood out to me was, the Republican claims there are, quote, good common sense opportunities out there to regulate the industry, end quote. Sanowski says, I don't know who Sanowski is. Does that name ring any bells for you all? It's a Republican, apparently. Quote, it may not necessarily make those who have cannabis licenses entirely happy, but again, as policymakers, we've got to kind of work between the two interest parties. I can pull this article up if we want to see it, but did that name ring any bells?
You said Sanowski?
Yeah. Maybe that was the name because it's about a hemp store owner, so maybe that was the...
This is
it says the Republican claims.
Representative Joe Sosnowski. 69th District. Belvedere, Loves Park, South Beloit. So
yeah, Rep. Joe Sosnowski. Yeah, criticizes the Democrats' lame duck push. The bill took up the last hours of the 103rd General Assembly. We just need to work together. You've got people with vested interests. You've got products out there. But I just thought that one quote that he said was that there are common sense opportunities out there to regulate the industry. It may not necessarily make those who have the cannabis licenses entirely happy, but again, we got to work between the parties. So.
Yeah, absolutely. This is just a general Republican sentiment here. I think we 100% agree with him saying that we can get something done as long as you open up hearings. If you open up hearings and listen to the people, it's pretty clear what we all want. So just make that happen and you'll get it done. And we can address legitimate public safety concerns. There's tons of majority support for common sense checkpoints. Let's not play games. And yeah, I think that Sosnowski, it literally speaks for 39 other Republicans in the House when he says that. So for you to say that you had the majority of Republicans on board, and the way he softens the blow so nicely, they may not get everything they want, or they may not be entirely pleased. Like, that's like saying, like, bless your heart, right? Like, that's like, you may not be entirely pleased, but yeah, you got to take care of both sides, and he's absolutely right. So let's have some type of compromise. I mean, like, I feel like the compromise already is putting in these additional regulations, because we've already had 6 years of stability and growth, and now the compromise is adding the regulations, the age gating and the testing, additional testing and stuff like that, and the packaging requirements. So, like, if you want even more of a compromise, like, we're already playing within the system that assumes that hemp can spontaneously become a Schedule 1 drug. So, like, we're not fighting that either. Like, we're not fighting that all of it has to be produced under a license and grown under a license and processed under a license. We're not fighting that either. So, like, we've made a lot of compromises all the way along this path of getting to the hemp, getting to the industry that we have now. And so you want to keep calling for compromise. Like, I think we're already well down that path. And if you want to talk about making more compromises, especially when it comes to taxes, or like more licenses and more fees, more barriers to entry, like, people don't want to hear that right now. And I think the Speaker of the House understands that, and I think a lot of House reps understand that too.
Yeah, it's just certainly been interesting to see how this whole thing has really heated up. It's really become like a hot button issue in Illinois. People get very upset. I've had people on the show that have had their, like, shops raided, and might have other guests that it's just crazy that, this is all happening right now,
Well, but this is all happening because of the way the CRTA was set up, right?
Right.
The shortcomings of it that we've talked about for years, this is just like the manifestation of it. It's like coming to a head.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And like Rachel said, like, we've all been working on this for years. So for us, it's just the next development. It just the way that makes sense. It's kind of interesting how it becomes hot and a hot topic in like the public sphere for little fits and bursts. But like for us, it's like this issue is just always simmering on. It's not on the back burner. Like, it's always right in our face. So to watch this story kind of evolve and then see all the public attention, like the amount of articles that have been written on this over the past month has been probably 10 times what the coverage that Illinois hemp has gotten over the last, or like in all the rest of 2024, pretty much.
Yeah, it's one of the things I don't like about this issue is how, like, it seems like people aren't arguing in good faith. Like, Phil and I have talked about in the past, like, I would appreciate it more if they were just like, look, this is how we think, like, cannabis sales should be treated, and that is in a limited market. Like, it really does, it's so frustrating to have to swim through the idea, or like try to address the concerns of like children and synthetics and all these things, right? Like, I felt a little bad for slowing down the show at the beginning because of that, but it's just like, seriously, like, it's been an effective narrative that they've put out there, you know what I mean? For better or for worse, in my opinion. But yeah, I also hate that, like, I've had, LinkedIn, right? It's almost a cliche to talk about it. Sometimes I'll just, I shared a post with the video that we just watched, and I literally didn't say anything. I just posted a transcript of what was said in the video. And people, like, say things like, looks like you picked your side. And it's like, what the side of like the consumer, like the only reason I like these things, and Phil and I have talked about like this in general, is like we the cannabis industry in Illinois just doesn't deliver, and hemp is providing the potential and certainly is delivering in a lot of ways. Like I got these, delivered to me. Can't do that with the cannabis products in Illinois. And I just don't understand like why they don't want to take the best parts of those policies and like incorporate it, and also drop the worst parts of their policies, right? Because they like rightfully point out all the things that suck, but they don't want to like drop that. They just want to kill the option that like literally has the solution to most of their problems. You follow me on that? Like 280E, being able to accept credit cards.
It's what Edie Moore said, right? Like they had to jump through all these hoops and go through all this bullshit to get their license. Everyone else should have to do that too. But by that logic, she wouldn't even have these licenses for dispensaries now, because that was what like the medical operators argued before rec. It's like, well, we had to go through all this stuff. You shouldn't make it too easy for these new people.
Yeah. That's a weird phenomenon. It like feels very much like cutting off the nose to spite your face, like when you could just like make it more flexible. You know what I mean?
Well, it's because they got into that, they took that limited licensing idea as, oh, this is a guarantee to success. But it's like, no, you're getting in business. You get in business, there's a chance you're going to lose everything. So like you can try to keep everyone out of your little like garden with a moat around it, but like those walls aren't going to stay up forever.
Well, isn't it interesting to see like that development, the story with, if people want to Google it, it's like GTI Salt Shed. They're like opening up this, or they're doing a collaboration. Sorry, do you know more about this, Phil?
They're opening up a hemp stand essentially at the Salt Shed, which is a music venue in Chicago. So they're going to be selling like cannabis beverages and probably edibles.
And a lot of their branded products, and they talk about all the things that are mandated in House Bill 64, like CGMP, produced in a kitchen with CGMP standards and blah, blah, blah. But it's which is awesome. Like, right. That's what's proposed in House Bill 64. But I guess my point is like, they're leveraging all those benefits, which is like, I think it's only a matter, like you should, yeah, it seems like people are starting to wake up to the fact that you can do this, Curaleaf is doing it as well. So it's just like, at this point, it seems like you had better get involved.
Well, why shouldn't they? I mean, and also, isn't this what consumption should look like? Like, what's wrong with someone buying a potent hemp beverage at a concert and having a great time? Like, if that's what they want to do, if they've secured their transportation for the evening, like, shouldn't it be easy for them to get that? Like, most venues, you're not allowed to bring that type of stuff in from outside, but people are constantly consuming that stuff, like either at the venue or prior to till they get to the venue. And it isn't it safest and most certainly most profitable to offer that for them instead of just like, that they're sneaking it in, but there's nothing you can do about it. So like that, I think there should be like lemonade stands that are selling hemp infused lemonade and a summertime concert series at the Salt Shed. That sounds like a great time. And we've been to concerts at the Salt Shed. It is a great time. And to throw hemp into that mixture is, it's perfect. So it's kind of a shame that, one of the biggest companies in Illinois is the only one who's going to have a hemp stand there. And it would be great to see some, more artisanal and like, small businesses supported by that type of, activity going on there, because it's a really popular venue. But yeah, why shouldn't we be able to do that? Like, why? And under the current laws that we have, there's a lot of questions that exist like that. Like, why shouldn't we be able to do this? And it's like, under the current regulations that exist for hemp, even, like, you can't just get a license and grow a plant on your balcony. Like you can't do that like it's any other type of flower. Like you could grow like a marigold on your balcony or something, but you can't grow a hemp plant. So like why can't you? Like we should be asking these type of questions. Like what's the problem with having a hemp infused foods and drinks just being distributed at sporting events and concerts and stuff like that? What's the problem with that?
Right, and I think they actually are doing it at sporting events somewhere now. I'll have to Google it, but I mean, like you say, what is the problem? That seems like the ideal future. It seems like the best way too, because everybody talks about the smell of cannabis, and all that stuff. It's like, all right, we'll drink it, you know. So, yeah. Any other thoughts on all of this, folks? It's been a real crazy thing to see go down. Certainly glad and excited to put it all together, but
yeah, just remember it's not a loophole, it's not an emergency. There's a lot of rhetoric that people throw around and a lot of conflation of issues, but just remember that this is about public safety and that there's super easy common sense stuff that we can do for public safety, and anything else that's outside of that is people are playing games, and it's a waste of your time to even try to satisfy these type of requirements that people throw out, like taxes and all this other stuff. Like we're not going to solve the budget problem by taxing hemp products an additional 14% in Cook County. Like it's not going to solve the budget problem. So let's not use this as an excuse to pass a bunch of garbage along with it, and let's do a standalone public safety bill that's everyone can understand, and it doesn't screw a bunch of people out of their investments. You're not the only people that are getting screwed out of their investments. Like the state marijuana people like to pretend that they're getting screwed out of their investments, that they had to work so hard to get their licenses and whatnot. But there's people on the other end with the same situation. Yeah, they didn't work for their license, but they still invested in real estate. They still invested in inventory. They have employees. They have all the other things that go with the business, and you want to take that away from them. So like why do we have to bring everyone down when all we need to do is set some minimum and everyone at least meet that, and let that be the solution to these cries of children being sick or whatever else they want to throw at the current industry.
And if there was going to be anything done, just because we've recognized prohibition as a failed policy, like you'd think, like if he was really concerned, and it seems like that's the only I don't want to say it's the only concern they've aired. It is the children and the competition to the cannabis licenses. That's kind of like the two-pronged approach I think they've been saying. But it's like if you're really worried about the children, like just issue an age gate. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like just make it, and then like be like, all right, legislature, like that podcast we listened to earlier. Like, why are you getting involved? Like, all right, legislature, figure it out between the Senate and the House. Like, figure it out. Like, the governor he should be governing things, which is like, it's like I was listening to a podcast about like we get it all mixed up what the president should be doing. Like, the president shouldn't be like directly calling and influencing policy. He should be presiding and making sure like crazy fucking shit doesn't come through, right? Same thing with the governor. Like it's literally part of the name. He's like supposed to govern, like kind of like tamp it down, like, but not get involved. Just like kind of like see what the people are coming up with, and like if it's not crazy, sign it into law, But it's interesting to see him get so involved on this specific part of policy, I guess is my point. And if he's like really worried about the children, like why not get an
I
age
think
gate?
it's one of the dangers of supermajority politics. Like when you have such a massive supermajority and such a democratic history as Illinois, it's easy to get involved in these types of schemes where the separation of power doesn't really exist.
So what's going on in the House though? Like it seems like the Senate is the old guard, like they're all like on the same page. Like there's only one person that voted against 4293. And I don't know if it's just because it came out of nowhere with these like crazy stories all at once, you know, kind of influx. But like, is the House just like new people and they're like kind of figuring it out? And you know, Mike Madigan is like, there was that switch over like pretty recently. So there's a new Speaker of the House, and it's like they're just kind of like figuring it out. Is that the dynamic? And that's why things aren't just like sailing through. Like what's going on there? I've been thinking about that.
So I think the Senate's better as voting as a block and just like being unified on stuff and showing unity when like there's a reason why the rule of 60 exists. It's because you don't want to waste people's time. You don't want to bring stuff up for a vote that's not going to pass. And so the Senate very much does that. They have an easier time doing that because they have I think a more like rigid structure in place as far as their committees, their just in general, all the support, the campaigns that they have, like all of that, it seems to be more organized on the Senate side. That's not to say that the House is disorganized, but that the House is a more direct representation of the population. The districts that they split the House into are different than the districts that the state is split into for the Senate. So you by design you have a greater representation and a more diverse representation in the House, and it's similar at the federal level. Like you know, you're going to see representatives in the House definitely pushing more controversial bills and putting up more of a fight on bills that go through the Senate because they feel more responsible to their constituents than they do to and their district than they do to you know, maybe their party leader or the Senate majority leader or the Speaker of the House or the governor. They know who put them in office. It wasn't the governor. And so that's who they really want to serve. And you know, I think being a rep's a good job and people want to keep that job.
Yeah, I just I didn't know if it was because like Don Harmon has just been like the speaker for a while, so he's got like like you said, it's just like they're all on the same page. I was gonna say he's got like shit locked down.
Well, it was not speaker. He's majority leader.
Majority leader. Thank you.
Right, and then you have the assistant majority leader, who was the what was his name? Something with a B. But anyway, he was the one who introduced that amendment. It was like House Amendment 2 to SB 2417 right at the last minute there.
Is that Cam Buckner?
Buckner, that was it. Yeah, so and Buckner being the assistant majority leader. So like you definitely have some like sort of disjointedness in the House there where kind of Buckner is sort of leading the charge as far as like the Democrats from the House that want to fall in line with the Senate and the old way of doing things with the, you know, the Democratic supermajority and all that. And then you have another branch of Democrats that again they're way more beholden to their constituents than they are to anybody else. And again, on top of that, you know, like the Speaker of the House, Chris Welch said, like there's a growing perception out there that CRTA stuff got messed up, social equity got messed up, and we don't need to keep doing that same stuff.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on just like how this whole like I don't know, it's just been honestly very entertaining. It almost feels like like built for television. Yeah, that's perfect. You know.
Well, it's built for Mini Doc Part 2, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's perfect, honestly. You know, just to see just how this has really come to bear, you know, or like just how hot button, like it's insane to me how divisive it is, and like honestly just how people don't get it. Like that's the most frustrating part. Like I said, I've been told, like, again, not to dwell on this too much, but like it seems like you've picked your side, and it's like people look at this like hemp versus marijuana, and it's like, no, I'm like Phil and I have talked about on the show in the past, like we like good cannabis programs when they're good cannabis programs. Like the reason this issue isn't like a big debate in Michigan is because they've made their cannabis market so easy to participate in, you know, like this issue doesn't exist, I think, in Oklahoma, you know, like states that have open licenses and consumer friendly cannabis programs. Like it's just like I say, it's like Phil said earlier, not to, like I said, but this isn't a new thing we're talking about. Like we've been trying to push for like loosening up all of these regulations for a long time, and it just so happens hemp came in and like did that, you know. So like, yeah, of course we're gonna applaud it for what it did. Rachel, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, and more to that from the hemp side is I had somebody recently say, oh God, I just wish Delta 8 wasn't the hill that the hemp industry was dying on. People who want to see more push for fiber and grain, understandably, who are thinking that this problem is a holdup in the hemp industry. And I just had to comment back that this is about fair access to the cannabis plant. That's all this is about. And for me, that is a hill I'm willing to die on. This plant has the potential to be revolutionary, to revolutionize a lot of the ways, a lot of the systems that we live under that are not working for us anymore. We can change them, and this can be a starting point for that. But if it's not accessible to everybody, then all that potential is gone. So just about fair access.
Right. And this is one of my last questions, because the other thing I got was like, you're pitting if we're pitting cannabis operators against hemp operators, and I said my response was that nothing's stopping you from getting into hemp, right? The same can't be said the other way around, you know? And if you want to say, just to extend this point briefly, that I am pinning them against each other, it's like, first of all of the licensees are saying that. And the head regulator said that hemp is a direct competitor to social equity. I am not pitting anybody against anybody. Like their own regulators are doing that, you know? Like I'm in favor of anything that's consumer friendly. So, yeah, it's an interesting place we're in. Phil, did you have any comments on anything?
Well, just that I would say, like I like to say, is that the reason they're not getting in hemp is because they want to be lazy business people who can just rely on this limited license to bring them some money. They just want to exist in this little like heavily regulated environment where they follow the rules and they just get to collect their money. They don't want to have to like actually go out and compete with people.
Yeah, that's what I always say. Like, if you're interested in that, if that's what you want, you're in the wrong industry. Go franchise a McDonald's. Like, if what you really want to do is just follow the rules and make money, that's the way you do it. You'll make your 3% profit a year or whatever, and that's it. Yeah, but buy another McDonald's if you're successful enough with it. Like, right. if that's what you want.
That's another thing that they've said, though. I don't mean to cut you off, Chris, but since you're saying that, and I want to give you the chance to respond to anybody, they say like, you're trying to make this into like a McDonald's job, like a gas station job. Like this should be a job that you can have higher wages on, or, stuff like that. They're trying to, like, you get what I'm saying?
I can go buy a $12 tomato at the farmer's market. Walmart's not the only place to get tomatoes. So that argument just doesn't hold water.
But Rachel, cannabis would get too cheap and people couldn't make any money.
That's a whole other discussion, Cole.
No, like she said, there's always going to be a market for like high value artisanal stuff. People will be able to tell the difference in quality. We can race to the bottom. We're already near it. And when you actually give people options to get, cannabis that actually tastes good and smells good, and is not dry as a bone, then you'll start losing people immediately. And that's and smokable hemp is only one part of the hemp industry, and it for the most part it is a competitor. It's still, I feel like, in all of our adventures with the state marijuana system and the national hemp delivery system, essentially is what you can tap into if you want to get smokable hemp. You can contrast and compare all the varieties that you can get, either from hemp suppliers nationally or from medical or recreational, adult use suppliers locally here in the state. In general, and I've been a consumer for a long time. In general, since legalization, the average quality, the stuff that comes across, that goes through my pipe or my paper, is lower. The average quality is lower since legalization, in my opinion. Access is better, like variety is better, but quality is lower. Nothing beats some of the stuff that we used to get before the days of legalization, and that's as far as I'll say before I implicate myself any further.
Anybody else got thoughts on that? Yeah, I don't know. I was playing, I hope I was playing devil's advocate on that when I said the price will get too low, because that's the argument against it. The open market approach is that people can't make any money off of cannabis. And I'm like, but I don't know. Phil, one of the points you had made to me is like the only reason cannabis ever cost as much as it did was because of the fact it was illegal. Like, what's the problem with, Rachel, like you said, cannabis being about the price of a tomato? Because it is a plant.
Yeah, I mean, if it's quality, then people are going to pay for it. But if you're worried that you can't, like Phil was saying, continue to sell your regs for a high cost, knowing that no one's going to compete with you or force you to do better, then, for me personally, I think the watery tomatoes that are hydroponically grown and for sale at Walmart taste unappealing. So I spend the money or I grow my own tomatoes because the value, the nutrition, all of it is superior and I know it. So it's worth it to me to either, and I'm a small farmer, so either to grow those products that people want and get the money for them because they're in demand and create those products that people want and they're willing to pay for, because I know, like I said, you go to the farmer's market, you can get $12 for a single tomato. It's out there. It's not necessarily just a race to the bottom. It can be, sure, the potential is there, but the potential is there too for people to make great products and be able to sell them for, the price that they want to see for it. Especially with agriculture. And I really think this is really interesting that, the cannabis and the hemp and people wanting to get back into farming, getting back into being your own business owner, all of these things tie in. So people who maybe don't understand agriculture enough, having strong opinions about the cost of goods and commodities and all that, I think they should just do a little more research on their local farms and see how the big picture. Maybe I'm just rambling now, but there's a bigger picture here that they're not quite capturing, I think.
Yeah, Phil and I have talked about it in terms of just even a simple thing like legalizing home grow. Like if a lot of craft brewers have gotten really popular, and it came from the concept of home brewing. That's perfect opportunity for talent acquisition and like you say, I don't know. It's just interesting. I've never heard of any concerns, and granted, I'm young and I'm not very I haven't done a lot of research on business specifically, but like I've never heard the idea that like people not being able to make money or have guaranteed success is a concern. Like I thought that was like the American dream almost, you know, like when you go to Silicon Valley, like a lot of people fail, you know, but some people get really like do really well. And like I don't know where this idea of like being guaranteed anything came from here in America, you know? Like it's a weird concept, like trying to prevent price compression. Like as consumers, we're all talking about like inflation and how much groceries cost and all this stuff. Like, what are you talking about? Things can get too cheap. You know what I mean? Like I understand things can get cheap and hard to compete, but to your point, Rachel and Chris, and I think Phil, even you said this, like people are going to stand out in their craft, and you're going to be able to set a price for that because your product is going to speak for itself. Like it's nothing new for farmers, like you said, Rachel, you know?
Yeah,
Not a
welcome
new
to
concept.
agriculture. This is an agricultural commodity. So this is what farmers are dealing with, diversifying their crops, making sure they can actually sell what they're growing. Like, welcome to agriculture. Yeah.
Yeah,
Any
it's
other
like, you know, you can't build trains because the price of grain will get too cheap.
Yeah, well, I've got a very, very short clip that I want to share before we go, but any other thoughts on the idea of cannabis pricing being getting too low or opening the market being a bad thing? Because it's just like
It, you know, maybe, and again, I don't want to implicate myself too much, but anyone who was able to get their hands on cannabis prior to legalization, the whole legal prices, all the legal prices are the same as the black market prices. Like, you know, $50 an eighth. Like that's pretty much what black market prices were before legalization started. Those prices are insanely high because the consequences of getting caught with cannabis for sale were insanely high. So we've replaced some of those consequences with regulations and kept the price that same insanely high price. There's no reason. I'm getting an echo.
You said it's like the voice of God.
No, I think it's good. I think it's good now. I don't know what you did or what I did, but it's good now.
it's probably what I did.
Okay. Yeah, there's no reason that the price of cannabis should be $15+ a gram. Like for something that you smoke, like it's nuts, man. It's nuts. And yeah, it back then, I mean, at least like over the years, the price of an eighth is still about $50 in 2025. $45, you know, whatever. For the most premium stuff, maybe it's $60. But with inflation, at least it's come down a little bit. I remember paying $60 like, you know, 10 years ago. So it's like it's still it's still slightly cheaper, but the only thing but again, quality's gone down. And now instead of worrying about being arrested for having an eighth, which can still happen in certain situations, now you're worried about whether or not you can afford it and how long the line's going to be at the one dispensary in a 45-minute radius from your house.
Yep. Straight up, and like you said, you can still get arrested for an eighth with certain situations. Well, I know we've been going for a while, so I'll close it out with this very short video that I found on Hemp that I really liked. So let's play it. And this may have been what was causing the echo earlier. So we'll mute our mics when we play this. I guess it's very short, like I said.
Most of this week's program is about a common plant, hemp. Hemp is a plant that has been illegal to grow in the United States since 1937. One of the uses for the hemp plant is marijuana. There are also many other uses for hemp, including making paper.
But here we have. Did you catch though the part where they said one of the uses for hemp is marijuana? I just thought that was like an interesting thing to hear, you know.
Yeah,
they go
that's
on to
a
talk
clip
about.
of Jack Herrera right there too. The guy
Uh, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it was Jack Herrera.
kind of looked like him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's from this show called The 90s, and yeah, I don't know. Like I say, it's a really small point, but I just found it interesting in the context of hemp, and they mostly focus on the like making paper and making materials out of it, purposes of it, and how it competed with like the paper industry and such like that. But yeah, just like that passing, mention, because people always act like somebody like just like got sneaky and it's a loophole recently, and it's like, no, these have always been this, like, and I even saw some reporting that said these are the plants are cousins, and it's like, no, they're the same plant,
Yeah, the whole loophole thing's crazy when you think about how long people have been saying this. This was a show in the 90s, right? So like 30 years, and you talk about how it was never the intent of the Farm Bill to make this loophole. It's like it's so unbelievably clear in what they say in the Farm Bill. There's no possible way they did not take this, 30 plus year old, like just like educational style content that everyone is familiar with into consideration when they wrote that law.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, Rachel, Phil? Cool. All right, well, we'll close it out. Thanks for hanging out tonight. Thanks for bearing with me on the technical difficulties. I'll edit those out, but we can laugh about it now. And hopefully things will go smoother in the future. But it was a real blast talking to you both tonight, and looking forward to seeing how this issue goes forward. I'm really hoping that people realize how good of a bill House Bill 64 is, because it addresses all of the, concerns that have come up in this debate, if you want to call it that. It doesn't seem like it's really a debate. It seems like everybody agrees on like a few things, and people are like purposefully confusing others, about what this is actually about,
Well, and it's not a debate because they're unwilling to have actual hearings on the thing, right?
True. And can I want to keep it short, because again, I know we've been, but like when you say that, do you mean like when they had hearings on 4293, people got the opportunity to speak on the record, and like, is that what you're talking about when you say no hearings? Because they're kind of like,
Right,
or
right.
like,
Because that's why they do gut and replace, and they try to have the votes all lined up
they
beforehand.
try to do it so quick
so you can just like get it through.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did take a few comments for that. They actually called Rachel's name for that, but they gave her no warning whatsoever that they would be calling her name that day. That if we would have known, she would have. They like, even with, they called her name, I think, in the early afternoon, maybe it was. If they would have told her that morning, we would have jumped in the car and gone straight down to the Capitol and made it in time. But we literally had no warning that this was going to happen. So yeah, if you call that taking in stakeholder feedback, or whatever you want to call it, consulting the hemp industry, or opening it up for public feedback, then yeah, it's about it. Yes, technically, yes, you did, but you, all you're doing is checking a box. You're not actually like legitimately inviting debate.
But also like a subject matter hearing, not just the hearing during the bill,
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't have to be related to a bill. This needs to be entering information on the public record, so that you can go to a legislator who may or may not be, fully informed on the issues, and you can say, were you able to view the 30 minutes or 1 hour of testimony from this subject matter hearing? Like this is, if you want to vote, have an informed vote, it is your obligation to view this content. Otherwise, you couldn't find the 30 minutes or 60 minutes of time ever in your entire schedule over the 103rd and into the 104th session to make time to understand the issue, and yeah, we want to make it so that it's a matter of public record, and we want to make it so that it's undeniable that you can't spare the 30 minutes or 60 minutes of your time at some point in your legislative career to get educated on hemp.
Yeah. Amen to that. Amen to that. Well, cool. Thank you for clearing that up for me because, we had mentioned it a few times and I thought I was picking up what you were putting down, but thanks for confirming that. All right, cool. Well, we'll close it with that. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.